Well, it's been a couple of days. I've had a time to think about it, time to calm down, let the emotions go to one side. But I'm still livid. I'm still really fed up and upset about the result on Sunday, because I felt it was a real opportunity for us to put to bed some of the pain that we've been going through, and to give fans that were actually in the stadium something to cheer about. I felt our fans were brilliant, to be honest with you. You could hear them, really singing and making a racket during that game, far more than a lot of the Man City fans, to be fair. Just my opinion. But it's not just about that, is it? It's not just about the game. There is so much to think about, so much to take in and kind of process, I guess. So I've been trying to think about all these different scenarios and things of where we are, and so as much as I wasn't happy with Mourinho as our manager, I've got to be honest, I do find it a really strange decision to dismiss a man who's won so many medals so close to a final. I mean, had this been 3-4 weeks pre when it was, I think I would understand it more. But to do that so close to a final really meant that, you're putting your club at another disadvantage. Because, they dismissed him with no clear plan of what they were going to do. I mean, when Pochettino went, he'd already lined up Mourinho. He already knew what was going to happen. He knew where he was going, blah, blah, blah. In this case, well, with all due respect to Ryan Mason, is that really the answer to a final? The lad's got zero experience of managing a club at any level in the Premier League, let alone a club that professes to be one of the big six and all the rest of it. So that's a really, really strange decision. There's got to be more that's gone on there than just, it was a bad run of results. Because surely you don't let a person go who most people would say, or say most people, a lot of people would say, would be a shoo-in and the person you would want in your dugout in a final, especially a final, that close to when he was dismissed. So for me, number one, total crazy decision. I'm not saying we would have won the game. I'm not saying the result would have been a lot different. But, you never know with them kind of tactical kind of viewpoints and all the rest of it, So then we move on and to the fact that we've brought in Ryan Mason as interim manager. And again, it is so close to the end of the season that, arguably, you want someone just to hold the fort and see us through to the end, And after the final, maybe that was the time that you let Mourinho go, unless you're thinking, well, if he wins it, we can't let him go. Well, you could still do it on results, surely. He's done it to plenty of other managers for far less, So then you've got Ryan Mason, who's totally inexperienced, as I said, with very little time to prepare for it. So you're putting him at a disadvantage already. I didn't see any real change in terms of the playing style, and I really didn't see any change in terms of the effort from the team. I don't think any of the players that had issues with Mourinho all of a sudden started to be better players, so we didn't get the managerial bump that we would have wanted. So that concerns me and shows it's why, for me, it's a strange decision. And then all you've got to do is you've got to look at the substitutions. I was flabbergasted, if I'm being honest. So let's start with the lineup. For me, I didn't understand the Winks decision, why Harry Winks was in there. I've always liked Harry Winks. I think he's a decent footballer, but I've got to be honest, I think, without playing on a regular basis and without really, setting the world alight, he's dropped down the pecking order. He's got no consistency and he's not really done anything. And so it appears that the club has outgrown Harry Winks. And, for me, I just don't see him as part of the future of the club. I really don't. As much as, I'd love to see a young lad from the area, fan of the club, to stay with the club. You've got to go with the best players that there are. So for me, that was a strange one. You got £65 million Tanguy Ndombele not playing, and again, he's not set the world alight. He's not played some good football for a number of weeks. So you have to be concerned about what's going on in his head, why he's all of a sudden started to become a lazy again. So that worries me. But I still think it's a strange decision. Surely a player with that talent you would want in your team. I get it. Him, Lo Celso and Højbjerg doesn't really work. But let's be honest, does Højbjerg and Winks and Lo Celso work? I don't think so. Not in a million years. So that was strange. And then when you get into the substitutions, I was just astounded, because we took off Lucas, who was the only player in my mind who was showing any kind of intent. And I know he's not everybody's his biggest fan, but he was the only one showing any real intent to me. Trying to get forward, running at people, and all the rest of it. So that surprised me. Sonny was far more out of the game than Lucas was, to be fair. And I'm not saying that that's Sonny's fault, because it was a difficult game to get into, because there was nothing in that midfield creating any kind of sort of forward play or anything. There was nothing, to get you sort of moving. So that surprised me that Lucas came off, right? But again, even stranger for me was the removal of Lo Celso to bring on Sissoko. Lo Celso wasn't having a massively good game. He hasn't been a great player for us. It hasn't really worked as well as we would want it to, despite all the hype. But again, at the start of the second half, he was the one showing any kind of imagination. He was the only one really trying to create anything. So again, you take him off and you bring on Sissoko. What does Sissoko bring to the team? What does he? What's he brought? I'm starting to get lost for words with it. To be honest, I just find it really, really odd. And then, so moving on from the manager to the defensive frailties, and I have to call it out. I can't, you guys can disagree with me. I don't mind. I'm honestly open to other people's opinions, because it's all about opinions, right? But what is Serge Aurier doing when he's fouling Sterling? He's going nowhere. It's late into the game, but he still manages to do that one thing that he's always going to do, and that's create a dangerous moment against you. It'll be a free kick, it'll be a penalty, it'll be something rash and something stupid. And yet again, he does exactly the same thing this time with a tricky little player who does love to go down, you know. Sterling, down he goes. And then what happens? Get the cross in. Who heads it in? Laporte. Who's marking him? Sissoko. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy decision. You know, Sissoko doesn't even get off the floor. You know, he doesn't really make a challenge. He makes a complete meal of it. It's just a waste of time. And then we can go, okay, let's move on. We go on and say, wow, Laporte should have been sent off. He had 2 yellow cards. Well, yeah, I agree. Both of those tackles should have been punished with a yellow card. However, if he gets a yellow card for the first one, is he likely to make the second one? Probably not. I mean, he's not stupid, surely, you know. So I guess it's kind of neither here nor there. You know, it's in the lap of the gods. It's in the luck of the Irish. It is, you know, it is what it is. You know, is that really gonna come to fruition? Is that really gonna happen? So, you know, you can't really hang your hat on it and go, oh, you know, if he wasn't playing, if he was booked, he'd have been sent off, and therefore we'd have got a draw, and we'd have gone to extra time, and we'd have won it. And it's all what ifs and buts and all the rest of it, isn't it? So, you know, for me, I don't really buy it. I think, you know, City were a better team than us. They played better than us. They've got better players than us, and it was always on the cards that we may lose. But you're always going to lose a game if you show no passion and no heart, and if you show no effort. That's always going to happen, you know. So it kind of leads me on to the Harry Kane and Son situation. Now, for me, controversially, I'm going to say those two players should leave. They should leave Tottenham, because at the ages they're at, they cannot afford another rebuild. They cannot afford another project if they are going to go on and give themselves a load of silverware that they can kind of go, this makes me a great player. For me, Harry Kane will always be a great player. I think he's fantastic what he does, and deserves far more than he's getting. However, he hasn't turned up at the finals he's played in. He hasn't turned up. He hasn't scored any goals. He hasn't really taken us to where we wanted him to be. And I'm not saying that's Harry Kane's fault. But at his age now, if he wants to put some silverware in his trophy cabinet, I don't think he's got time to waste. And so for me, I think, as controversial and as upsetting as it is to say, I think it's time for him to move on. Because it'll be too late to build a team around Harry Kane now. When you've got so far to go like we have. If you're a team that just needs to add the finishing touches, you know, and add that extra bit of quality, then Harry Kane all day long. But we are far from that place. Absolutely far from that place. There is no way that our club is in any fit state to keep hold of those two players. And Son the same, you know, maybe a little bit more opportunity to stay, but then, you know, why would he? You know, why would he want to? And so, you know, it kind of leads me onto my last point, really. Where do we go from here? Daniel Levy. So, considering the amount of people that Daniel Levy has dismissed for poor performance, you've got to ask yourselves, when is there going to be a review time from Joe Lewis about Daniel Levy's performance? Because Daniel Levy may well have delivered a new stadium. He may well have delivered world-class training facilities. He may well have delivered loads of money. But ultimately, he's delivered one League Cup in 20 years. And as a football club that's trying to build its international brand, that is not good enough. You are not gonna get to that next level delivering that kind of result. It'll take you so far. You can go so far on the fact that you're in the Champions League and all that sort of stuff, but it won't take you to the superstar level that teams like Manchester United, Liverpool, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Juventus, all these teams that have this kind of international standing and history. You cannot do that without success, like football success, because ultimately this is about a football club. So for me, Daniel Levy's got to go. He's got to go, as a minimum, he's got to go from footballing matters. If Joe Lewis is not prepared to sell the club to someone who wants it to be successful on the pitch, then he needs to find somebody who's going to be successful making us successful on the pitch, and not just someone who's able to be a good businessman making good deals. The other thing in that has got to be our recruiting process, because we're bringing in so many young players with quality and ability and all this kind of stuff, and sell-on values. That's great, but at the end of the day, that's not going to deliver you what you need. I mean, someone like Harry Kane doesn't come along all the time into your club. You don't grow those players all the time. There's not many clubs that have that. So he's a bit of a freak of nature, and then there was a long time when we wasn't even expecting him to be a success, you know. So for me, I just think the time has come. You know, Levy needs to leave in some kind of capacity, whether that's just from footballing matters, whether that's from the club altogether, whether that's a full sellout. You know, that is really up for debate. And I know the fans want ENIC out and all the rest of it. And you know, for me, I don't know. I don't know whether it's about the owner from that perspective, or whether it's about Daniel Levy and the role he plays. You know, for me, I think, you know, let's try that first. You know, I don't necessarily think we need richer people, because Joe Lewis is rich enough, and he has spent some decent money recently. You know, we've had our times where we haven't spent money and we made ourselves, you know, look ridiculous and that, you know, but there's plenty of clubs out there spending lots of money that are still not getting the success. I mean, bear in mind, we've still got Manchester City looking for a treble, you know. So, you know, let's be clear, they've won the League Cup 4 years on the trot. So, I mean, there ain't many teams out there challenging, is there? You know, so, and other teams are spending money as well. So it is one of those things. If you don't spend that big amount, you know, overspend against the others, then really you're always going to be chasing the pack. And again, that's where this recruitment comes in. You know, you've got to be looking for these best players in these best positions. You cannot just be going, you know, we'll take this person or we'll take that person, you know, and they'll be good enough in a couple of years' time. You know, it's just not going to work. We've been trying that for, what, 5 years or so? And it's just not happening. You know, it's just not happening. There seems to be a model for success which says you go out, you spend billions, and you get the results and you get the trophies. That's what Chelsea did. That's what Man City are doing. That's what Manchester United used to do before that. They overspent everybody and got the best players. And they bought the best players in the best positions, and if they didn't turn out any good, they moved them on and got somebody else. They didn't hang about, you know, they didn't hang about with it. And that's where it is. So it's a sad day, you know, it's a sad situation. That is modern football as it is. In the same way, it drives me mad when every single player who gets touched falls on the floor rolling around holding their ankle. That's football. That's what we're used to. That's what we're getting now. And it's the life, it's what we've sold our soul for, you know. The Super League thing, as much as I am against it and despise it, is nothing different from the creation of the Premier League, the creation of the top four, and all that kind of stuff that's all been engineered by Sky Telly and those people just to add hype transfer deadline day. I mean, how many times have I spoken about that sort of stuff? You know, it's just the same thing, but just on a different scale. You know, so for me, football isn't what it was, but ultimately, as I've said many, many times, football's in your blood, it's in your heart, and your team is your team. You're never going to change it, whatever happens. So, as much as we're in pain, we'll keep going back because we're gluttons for it. You know, it's like an addiction. It's your life. It's your entertainment. It's part of you, and you're not going to move on. So, you know, I guess in summing up, I'm still despondent. I'm still upset. But I think there is so much more to this situation than just losing yet another final. But as I always say, at the end of the day, up the Spurs.